The International Red Cross recently launched an appeal to save an estimated 80,000 people in the far northeast of Russia. Many are beyond the Arctic Circle, literally stranded in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Our special correspondent Sue Lloyd-Roberts reports from the Magadan region, home of Stalin's infamous gulags, where political prisoners were enslaved and forced to work in the mines. Later, tens of thousands of people flocked there voluntarily to earn what was known as the Big Ruble. When the Soviet Union collapsed, they were stuck.
To mention the Kalmar River to a Russian is like speaking of Auschwitz to a Westerner. Gulags once lined this frozen and infamous stretch. Stalin's labor camps, where up to 20 million inmates are said to have either worked, starved or frozen to death. Camp number 3 was built on a gold mine for political prisoners, and surprisingly, the few who survived the experience still live in the area.
People would go into the forest and cut their fingers off with an axe, so they didn't have to work in the mines. Some people went so far as to kill themselves to end the suffering. I begged my guard not to beat me, not to humiliate me, but to shoot me. And he said, "No, you swine, you carry on working."
Like 80-year-old Vasily, 72-year-old Tatiana claims she was sent to the Gulag on trumped-up political charges. She was given a 5-year sentence when she was 17, but with all the terrible memories associated with this area, why didn't she and the others leave when they were released?
Where could I go? Where could anyone take me? When I was released, there were no trains, no planes, there was no transport at all. Remember, 10,000 kilometers. The distance from here to home is not like 100 kilometers. 100 kilometers is simple. We walked 130 kilometers to get to the camp. Barefoot, bedraggled, half naked we were when we walked there. But how could we walk 10,000 kilometers?
Although Stalin's network of gulags was dismantled over 40 years ago, history would appear to be repeating itself here in northeastern Siberia. While there are few of those former political prisoners still alive, there's a new generation of exiles here, made prisoners by the collapse of the Russian economy. The industrial infrastructure which had been built around the gulags survived their closure. Moscow enticed people here to work on the mines and to keep the towns going by offering wages 3 times those they could earn back in European Russia. They came in their tens of thousands, the Soviet equivalent of the gold rush, expecting a hard frontier lifestyle and high earnings. But the industry collapsed along with the Soviet Union. The only energy generated today is from the coal-fired boilers which heat the town but leave its residents marooned in oceans of black snow. With the collapse of the ruble last year, Moscow can no longer send the annual shipments of food and medicine which kept these communities alive. Like those early Gulag inmates, people are stranded. It's taken Red Cross worker Valery 9 hours to reach Siemchan, the first town on their list, from where his wife Luba says there have been pleas for help for over a year now. But she explains they've had a struggle collecting the aid. The couple sent to mount this, the first stage of the rescue operation, know all about the shattered hopes of the big ruble hunters. Luba first arrived in the region as a government cartographer. Valery was a geologist for the gold mine.
When
I was young, I read all the romantic adventure stories about life out here. Some were even written by geologists who'd been out here before me. You know, the thrill of it all, the scent of the tiger, and the idea of drinking around open fires. So I came out here to experience all that, and now find myself working for the Red Cross to alleviate suffering. Everyone is now in trouble around here.
Luba is worried. They only have 280 food boxes, and they've been told that 700 families can't feed their children. She says people are going to have to share.
It's very difficult in Russia if you're involved in getting humanitarian aid distributed. The state can no longer look after people today, and we charity workers have to determine who is most in need. And then, to make matters worse, the concept of charity doesn't exist in this country. It's so difficult, but we do the best we can.
When Luba meets the first family, she changes her mind about making them share a box. The father, Igor, tells her that one of his 3 children is already in hospital with pneumonia, compounded by malnutrition. He came here as a skilled mechanic with the dream of earning enough to build a house back home in the Ukraine. Now there's no work, they can't afford train tickets home, and they've had nothing to eat but bread and salami for over a year.
Раньше здесь в Симчане был Gulag, политический, содержали заключенных.
Simchan used to be a gulag, and I've read all the books about how political prisoners were once sent here and how they lived, and honestly, when I compare our life with theirs, I conclude that they were fed better than we are now. The fact is that our government has created an economic gulag which hardly differs from what existed here before. We can barely survive here in the north, and no one is doing anything to get us out so we can live a normal life. I've written to the local government, the regional government, and even the central government asking them to rescue us, to send us home. It's this old Communist Party style bureaucracy. Sorry, I should say democratic style bureaucracy now. It does nothing for people. We've endured poverty for 2 years now, and there's no end in sight.
The authorities used to airlift supplies to reach settlements hundreds of miles apart, but now it's up to Luba hitching a lift on a passing helicopter. She's heard of families of indigenous people who were stranded by the heavy snowfall and couldn't get to their winter settlement, and who, in desperation, have converted former Gulag buildings to live in. These people, too, feel betrayed by history. Stalin forced them to abandon their traditional self-sufficiency as fishermen and reindeer herdsmen and taught them to rely on the state and the mechanized collective farm. Now their machines have broken down and they're starving. Reindeer meat is all they've had to eat, washed down with melted snow, which is often contaminated. They've all been sick, and the Red Cross food parcel comes too late for their mother, who died during the winter. One often hears the word abandoned in these parts.
Трудности в том, что от администрации помощи вообще никакой нету.
We've been abandoned to our fate, to whatever may happen to us. We need clothes, medicine, transport and fuel, but the authorities don't help. First the animals started dying, and now it's the people.
Back in town, the hospitals have run out of drugs, and Luba apologizes to doctors because she hasn't brought any. She explains that the food parcel is just a token of support. The doctors only stay on because they too can't leave. They can't afford a plane ticket, let alone food. This senior surgeon from Moscow says he survives by picking mushrooms and berries in the summer, and sometimes a grateful patient will give him a slice of meat. There are no medicines to treat the children who have pneumonia or TB. The rates here are among the highest in Russia. The doctors only keep them here to ensure that they get fed and keep warm.
В течение года и более сотрудники нашей больницы не получают заработную плату.
For the last year, we haven't received any wages here in the hospital, neither the doctors nor any of the staff here. We have to manage somehow, because to drop everything and walk out, that would be impossible. After all, although I can't treat them, I really love these children and will stay here with them.
The orphanage is in crisis. There are only 14 children here, most of them not because they're orphans, but because their parents can't afford to feed them. There's room here for the 200 children on the waiting list, but the orphanage can't take them because they're running out of food. We weren't allowed to visit the mental hospital next door, where, I was told, 90% of the patients are suffering from stress-related mental illnesses, in a town where suicides have increased 4-fold in the last year alone. I spoke to the governor of the region and asked him about the problems in his area. He said to me there were no problems. The statue of Lenin still stands here in the main square of the regional capital, Magadan, and it would appear those old Soviet habits of secrecy and national pride at all costs remain along with it. Stalin built his gulags so far away and made them so awful in order to deter his people from criminal activity and political opposition. Unable to escape, the present inmates of this Gulag archipelago must be wondering what they did wrong.
And that's all from us at Reporters for this week.